Hey folks, hope you all are doing well. I'm Karan Bandal from Econosite, your weekly economic wrap from India and around the world. So let's get started with defense. India, US and the fighter jet engine. India's quest to develop a competent fighter jet engine remains elusive despite decades of work put in by the state-run corporations. India's first indigenous fighter was F414 Marut. It was fitted with Orpheus 703 jet engine developed by the Bristol Engine Company in the UK. India eventually produced a more powerful version of Orpheus 703, but it proved unsuitable for the Marut's airframe and the aircraft became obsolete before its time. All this went on during 1950s and 60s. Then in 1983, the government sanctioned work on light combat aircraft project, which we now know as Tejas aircraft. Since 1982, India again tried to develop an indigenous Kaveri engine for Tejas that could generate a thrust of 81 kN. But despite 13 years of efforts, the engine was only able to generate 70.4 kN of thrust. As I said, India's indigenous jet engine remains elusive. This is where the mega defense deal between India and the US comes in, which is likely to be announced during Indian Prime Minister's visit to the US in June 2023. This deal will facilitate India's state-run Hindustan Aeronautics Limited's partnership with American firm General Electric to jointly manufacture indigenous jet engines of fighter aircraft. According to the sources in the defense establishment, the plan is to manufacture GE F414 engine in India. The process will involve first making components for the engines in phases before moving to the full step up, which will take at least a decade. How this gets implemented on the ground remains to be seen, but this development appears promising as India, the largest arms importer country, can save massive foreign exchange in the range of billions of dollars each year if she can make high value defense equipment like jet engines and fighter aircrafts domestically. Let's move on to understanding population pyramids, that is demographics of nations. We often hear about demographics and economic prospects of a nation being spoken in the same vein, rightly so, as the two measures are closely connected. Demographics, roughly speaking, is the study of a population based on factors such as age, race and sex. Researchers, corporations go deeper. They also include characteristics such as employment, education, income, marriage rates, birth and death rates, etc. But on the macro level and at a country level, let's look at population pyramids with three factors: age distribution, median age and fertility rate. Here is India-China comparison. They both have about 1.4 billion people each, but their population pyramids look completely different. See, China has a constrictive population pyramid, meaning they don't have a lot of young people as indicated by the smaller bars at the bottom, but as you go up on this graphic, you see the bars getting longer. In other words, China has a lot more middle-aged and elderly people than young ones, which makes it a relatively older country with a median age of 38 years, and this is the result of decades of the one-child policy. India, on the other hand, has a strong base of young and working-aged people, a young country with a median age of 28 years. For a developing nation, this is a highly desirable demographic. Let's understand why. India's economy is primarily driven by domestic consumption or demand. Consumption pattern of young people differs significantly from that of middle-aged and elderly. Young people consume a wide range of goods and services. They tend to spend money on buying a house, appliances, furniture, automobile, education for their children, consumer electronics, etc., generating massive demand in the economy. Thus, a country like India is set to ride the productivity boom and a steady rise in demand of its large working age and young population. The challenge for India will be to ensure substantial investment in education, healthcare and job creation for this large population to realize the demand potential. China is lacking this future domestic demand optimism. Therefore, they'll have to rely heavily on the exports growth to keep their economy from stagnating at a time when their workforce is likely to decline, rather likely to crash. Finally, one reason to be worried about India despite a 7+% growth. Drawing on our discussion regarding demographics and consumption, upon dissecting India's recent growth numbers, we find that what is boosting India's growth is a surge in investments. There is nothing wrong in that, but we know Indian economy is primarily driven by consumption and consumption has remained sluggish. Private consumption grew at a paltry rate of 2.8% in the fourth quarter. Higher inflation may be the key reason behind the poor performance. This remains a concern because for a sustainable economic growth, consumption must return to a robust growth path. On investments, the picture is encouraging. GFCF, which reflects investment, rose. Or, in simpler words, asset creation rose 8.9% in Q4 and 11.4% for the full financial year. The central government's capex push has been unrelenting, with around $120 billion budgeted for capex this fiscal year. The percentage of capital formation in India's GDP is also at a decadal high. We are seeing early signs of private capex picking up in response to this push from the center. The construction sector appears to have returned closer to pre-pandemic levels also. The sector grew over 10% for the fourth quarter as well as the full financial year. This is great news since the sector helps to absorb excess rural labor and create a multiplier effect on the overall economy in the medium term. In summary, India-US partnership continues to get stronger. A joint jet engine production will take this relationship to another level completely. At home, India is doing fairly well on key components of the economy, but consumption or demand aspect of it needs to be looked at more closely by the policymakers because India's demographics are perfectly suited for a consumption-led growth. On investments, the center should continue with what they are doing. I hope you found this week's wrap interesting. I'll speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.